You want to listen to a podcast?
By who?
Georgia GOP Congressman Doug Collins.
How is it?
The greatest thing I have ever heard in my whole life.
I could not believe my ears.
In this house, wherever the rules are disregarded, chaos and mob rule. It has been said today, where is bravery? I'll tell you where bravery is found and courage is found. It's found in this minority who has lived through the last year of nothing but rules being broken, people being put down, questions not being answered, and this majority say, be damned with anything else. We're going to impeach and do whatever we want to do. Why? Because we won an election. I guarantee you, one day you'll be back in the minority and it ain't gonna be that fun. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Doug Collins Podcast. Glad to have you here. Busy Monday. Want to get started on a few things. We're going to talk about some things that are happening in D.C. But, of course, first and foremost, the issues that we're going to have in dealing with the immigration bill is going to come up in a big way. After the break, we're going to get into the immigration bill. But we're going to also talk about a couple other things that are coming up that really, I think, go back from last year that I can point back to and say, look, I told you so. This is actually not just last year. It was 2 years ago when the Republicans decided to do a gun control bill and partnered with the Democrats and passed a bill that I told you then what was going to happen, and it's actually starting to happen. So right after the break, we'll come back and get us all started on this Monday edition of the Doug Collins Podcast. Glad you're here. Hey, folks, when you look out and you see the country and just the disarray it is, you see the Biden administration, you see the wholesale prices have just went through the roof again. Inflation is tearing us up. If you have your finances all impinged in just a few areas, if you're just in stocks and bonds and you're not diversified, I got some news for you. You need a navigator. You need somebody to help you get to where you need to go with those finances. And I can't think of anybody better to do that than my friends at Legacy Precious Metals. You need precious metals in that portfolio. You need gold and silver. And Legacy Precious Metals, the folks there, they're the navigators. They know how to deal with tough times. They know and how to look ahead and take your personal situation and make it something that can be workable for you in the long term. Because that's, at the end of the day, that's the one you're most concerned about. You need to make sure that your personal finances and your retirement are secure. You need folks like Legacy Precious Metals helping you in that. They will take the time to learn you. They'll learn your finance. They'll learn where your investment goals are, and they'll help you get there. And metals and gold right now, in this kind of crazy inflation, in this kind of crazy economy with the Biden's economy, is just, you need that help. And Legacy Precious Metals is the one to do that. So give Legacy Precious Metals a call, 866-528-1903, 866-528-1903, or you can always visit them online at legacypminvestments.com, and you can download their free investor's guide. Legacy Precious Metals, they're the ones you need. They're the navigators to help you through these turbulent times. Hey, everybody, Mike Lindell and the MyPillow employees want to thank all of my listeners, the Great Doug Collins Podcast listeners, for your continued support. To thank you, they're offering a overstocked clearance sale right now for the best price you ever use when you use the promo code Collins, COLLINS, and you get free shipping on the entire order. You get 50% off the MyPillow 2.0, the brand new flannel sheets that just arrived and won't last long. Get six-pack towel sets for only $29.98 and take advantage of the free shipping on large items like mattresses and mattress toppers. 100% made here in the United States and on sale for as low as $99. Everything is on sale, from the brand new kitchen towels that have the same technology as the bath towels that actually absorb dog beds, blankets, couch pillows, and much, much more. To get the best specials ever, go to the mypillow.com, and use the promo code Collins, COLLINS, or call 800-986-3994 and use the same keyword Collins, COLLINS, and get free shipping on your entire order while supplies last. MyPillow products, thank you. Y'all go check them out. All right, let's get started on a few things coming up. I've been talking to you about the issues in the world, and let's just go since our last time to talk together. The U.S. has responded to the deaths of 3 Americans in Jordan over a week ago now. It took almost a week to respond. Again, heavy bombing. It seems to be more than just the over 80 targets at one time by flight. There were also some others that continued over the weekend in Yemen for the Houthi rebels as well. So it's coming back. But again, the question does arise is, did we wait so long? Were they, indications of what we're going to do, to the point that where the muted effect of them the terrorists being able to move targets, move equipment, move people. All those are valid questions, I think, asked of this administration. And I think, the fact that they did something is important. But as we've talked about here before on this podcast, bullies only respond to bullies. And Iran was actually the interesting part here is there was a lot of reports coming out from Iran that, they do fund this. They know they're being held accountable, or at least partially held accountable by this administration for what they're doing. But there also seems to be some more and more concern that they realize what attacks on Americans and deaths of American service members would do to American involvement in this region. And there was at least some conversation on whether this was an attack that was not supposed to have happened, or at least they were not the Iranian militia groups that are funded by Iran, the Iranian Republican Guard. These issues are, how far are they pushing out? Now, I think Iran is pushing this to the absolute most they can push it, hoping that we'll lose resolve, but also hoping that as they push forward, it removes Israel's resolve to continue to clean out Gaza. And I think that could be more of the issue as we go here. But again, keep following this one. There was another attack just last night on a American installation and other installations there. None Kurdish soldiers were killed. There's not an American casualty count or a casualty at this point, but they've not quit. So we need to continue to look at this as we go forward from a bigger perspective. Number one on the world list is that. Number two on the list of things that we are all listening to and talking to today has to deal with immigration. Now, I've lost track, frankly, how many times we've talked about the problems at the border, and especially under the Biden administration, the lack of closing the border and securing it properly. We've had Tom Homans on here. We've had Sarah Carter on here. We've had, just numerous guests, including, myself, who dealt with immigration in the Judiciary Committee in the U.S. House on the problems of not only legal immigration, but illegal immigration as well. Up until this last few years of migrant surge across the southern border, what most people didn't realize is that the number of illegal aliens in the country was split about 50-50 from those who crossed across the northern or southern border, mainly the southern border, walked in illegally, or those who came here with the government's permission or blessing, and those were people who came with a permission from the government called a visa. The visas allow them to come from other countries and spend time here, whether it be as a student, a worker, or other various categories of visa requirements that they're able to come. The problem is a lot of people get over here, of course. They like what they see. They love the freedoms. They love the economy. They love having everything here that they've seen about and read about as they were growing up in their countries of home. And they said, yeah, hey, let's stay here. And so for the longest time, we've had a large group of people who are visa overstays, which are still illegally here, that have made up a great deal of the illegal immigrant population. I think that number is probably shifted and skewed from being more 50-50, or maybe a little, more visa overstays than illegal immigrant. But now, with the mass open border at the southern border, those numbers are probably a little bit further skewed more toward the problems that we're experiencing on the southern border, which are going to, of course, correlate to problems with the drug addiction and drug interdiction and things that are coming across, where we're not being able to we're only getting a certain amount of the drug flow coming across the border. The rest of it is making it to every, basically every city, every county, every state in this nation. So immigration is always a top priority. The thing that, and before we get into the Senate bill, this is the Senate bill that Senator Lankford from Oklahoma was the Republican lead negotiator, if you will. Kristen Sinema out of Arizona, an independent, Chris Coons, I think, and others were, and some other Democrats, came together to form this bill. Now, took many, many months to decide this. It had been worked on for a long time. But as things were getting leaked out, there was a lot of pushback from the media and through members of the Democrats Party, and also the mainstream media saying, hey, what people are saying isn't true. They talked about the 5,000 a day. They talked about the stoppage. Well, it turns out most of it was true. And now there's different ways to interpret how you go about it. The real issue here in this bill, and I want you to understand this. If you're looking at an immigration bill, for most Americans, is what stops the illegal immigration into our country. And they're not looking at a certain threshold number. They're not looking at saying if we let 500 in, then we'll not stop then that's all you get in for the day. Most people in the United States, when they look at immigration, they want to know, why can't we stop the border? Why can't, some people are going to get across the border because simply we can't get to them, or they come across in the middle of the desert, and our Border Patrol agents are not at every square inch of the mile, so they get through. That is, understood in this fact that happens as we go along. What they don't understand is how the government itself can basically take the position that we're just going to let a vast number of people come in, even if their claims are frankly going to be turned out to be bogus. That's the asylum claim issue that we talk about a great deal. But to not stop it, and they know, again, this goes into the presidential politics, which we talked about last week here on the podcast. What are things that are going to be very instrumental in the negotiations of voters' minds to get to the presidential election in November? And that is going to be immigration. I mentioned this last week on an interview with Fox. We did some time with Fox and Friends when we talked about a new poll that came out from both Fox and their affiliate pollsters that did Georgia and Wisconsin. In both cases, immigration was a topic in their top 4 or 5 that people were concerned about. So it is there. We already saw it out of Iowa being one of the top concerns coming out of the Iowa caucuses, in which President Trump won, also in the New Hampshire primary, which President Trump also won. So these immigration is playing a big part. So people are thinking about it. First off, let's just look at a few of the things that are involved in this bill that came out of the Senate, and a lot's being made of it. A lot of stuff that's coming across, and I'm going to just hit the bigger ones now. Really, the key changes is going to be in the way asylum is done and how many people are coming across. So look, there's new emergency in this bill. There's new emergency authority to restrict border crossings if the daily average migrant encounters reach 4,000 in a 1-week span. If that metric is reached, Homeland Security Secretary could decide to largely bar migrants from seeking asylum if they cross the border illegally, which, again, this is where it gets into the loophole argument. The question for Mayorkas, who is being impeached by possibly as early as Thursday this week in the United States House, is he believes that these asylum seekers and others who come across who make what is in essence bogus claims of asylum are now coming through under parole, and they're coming through to be processed out in the immigration system. He may look at that as these are not illegal crossings. And again, how are you going to count the, quote, illegal crossing? If he's not counting any of these as illegal, then only the ones coming through the river or only the ones coming through a non-point of entry possibly could be considered illegal in this part. At least it leaves it open enough to that interpretation, which then gives Mayorkas and the Biden administration the freedom to say, well, these are not illegal coming through, so it doesn't meet the 4,000 threshold in a week span. Now, if migrants cross over 5,000 in a given week, they're required to use the authority enough to shut the border down. It doesn't shut it down completely. Asylum claims will be still processed through regular ports of entry. Notice there seems to be a contradiction here on how this is getting done and where they're actually targeting these encounters. Now, if it reaches 8,500 in one day, the department is required to trigger the quote, closing of the border, although it doesn't close the border. It just simply determines how they handle those that they catch in non-legal ports of entry. The interesting part about this is, out of all of the other things that are mentioned in this, from giving money to asylum changes to how people must address the asylum standard of fear for their own life and safety. The interesting part is this closing off is limited to a number of days. In the first year, the government can only use it for 270 days, 225 calendar days the second year, 180 days in the third year, and the authority sunsets altogether after 3 years, meaning that in 3 years, if this is still going on as bad as it's going on right now, there will be no arbitrary cap. In other words, there could be 10,000, 15,000 people crossing a day, and there's no more closing, because this is the only provision that was allowed to sunset into this. Other things that we've just talked about, it codifies a policy that requires the government to process at least 1,400 asylum applications at point of entry when emergency authority is triggered. So remember, when that authority is triggered, whether they do it at the 4,000, 5,000, 8,500 level, there's still 1,400 every day going to be able to get in under the applications through the actual ports of entry. It raises the legal standard of proof to pass an initial screening, but doesn't, again, initial screening is not the determination if they're going to be able to stay here. It just simply maybe makes it a little bit harder. They're going to have to change a little bit about what they say and how they say it. Was there a place they could have stopped on the way? Was there, could have moved inside of the country? All these kind of things that could be looked at. It supposedly expedites the asylum processing timeline from years to 6 months. Why aren't we doing that now? Again, I think these are certain things that could be implemented now and see results, but we're just not doing it. It also, and this is a concern when they're going through this new process in which U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service would decide asylum claims without it going through the immigration court system. Now, this comes through another group in the asylum area in the immigration system, in which I know previous administrations, the Trump administration and others, have had trouble dealing with, because it seems that the people who are in this category in which would be deciding this are decidedly more on the process of granting entry into the United States, as opposed to actually taking the accounts into the stories into account, looking at the evidence and trying to figure this out. That we'll speak more of that as in the weeks and months to come, because it's really, if you look at the practical nature, it sounds good in theory, but the practical nature here of this is where they're routing these to is just not a good thing. It does still preserve the president's authority to designate humanitarian parole on a case-by-case basis, and President Biden has used this for Ukrainians, Afghans, Cubans, Venezuelans, and Haitians, among other populations. And really, the Haitians and others came from natural disasters. Venezuela is a man-made disaster of their own country. So those are interesting parts that they can still bring these people in under a humanitarian aspect, and again, maintaining a reason for these to come from these different countries. It supposedly narrows the parole issue. We talked about that earlier, that Mayorkas and others will be able to give to let people come through in what they call a legal process. It also, this is an interesting twist to this, it also authorizes $250,000 addition immigrant visas to be spread out over 5 years for families and applies to employment-based immigrants. So you're going to have more visa availability for, I'm assuming they're looking through this for jobs such as H-1Bs and other visas that they come over here and work under. That is looking to be expanded under this program over a 5-year period of 250,000 people. It also provides a pathway to citizenship for Afghans paroled in the United States after the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, and extends a special immigrant visa program for Afghans who worked for the federal government. That could have been passed. It should have been passed by itself. You don't leave people that you promised to take care of in the way that they did in this process. In Afghanistan. This is just again, trying to correct a Biden administration, walking away from those who had helped us in Afghanistan as we go forward. So this is what the bill does. Here's the problem that most are having at this point. And just to tell you, the House of Representatives, the 4 leaders in the House of Representatives have already said this is dead on arrival. Don't even, you're wasting your time trying to get out of the House. Now, at last count, I think there was 15 Republicans in the Senate and 3 Democrats in the Senate who have said they're not voting for this bill. That's important because as you keep watching, not only the Democrat side, but on the Republican side as well, the magic number here is to get 60 votes. In other words, you're going to have at least 10 to 12 or possibly more, 15 now with the 3 Democrats defecting, people to vote for this bill to get out of cloture, to get over that 60 threshold. If they can't get the 60 threshold, this bill never comes to the floor. This will be the interesting developments in the Senate over the next few days, is will they be able to get over the 60 threshold? Schumer is threatening a vote as early as Wednesday, Thursday this week, the procedural vote to move this thing forward. It's already in deep trouble. And I think when you have the House basically saying this will never come up for a vote, we're not going to touch this, it really does not give any cover for the Senate Democrats or Senate Republicans to, especially those who may look at this and say, look, this just isn't worth it. But given how this plays in the different states, this goes back to, if you remember the Gang of Seven debate from years ago, on immigration. You remember the Rubio discussions back in 2013. Again, there's long-lasting memories of those who tried to fix immigration in ways that frankly were not palatable to the voting base, whether they be liberal or conservative. And that's something that both sides are having to deal with here, because you have 3 Democrats who have already come out and said we're not voting for an immigration bill like this. And there's been many other Democrats who have criticized Joe Biden and the administration for getting behind such a bill is this. So you've got a problem in all ways. The big issues that we have here right now is, number one, this does not seem, as I stated earlier in the podcast, most people are saying if we're having 1,000 come across today, how do we stop or narrow that down to even further from the perspective of 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 coming across today? This doesn't even address those real issues. It does portend to make it harder to apply for asylum, although I've already talked to some folks and heard that that's really not the way this will play out because of the loopholes in this. It still gives the Department of Homeland Security a great deal of leeway in how they interpret these crossings and who gets in and who gets out. And this is where I'm going to bring it back and we'll see this play out over the next little bit. It's not really going to happen in the House, so we're not going to waste a great deal of time on this. There is the political play here that Democrats will try to do everything they possibly can to get this voted out of the Senate, send it to the House, where the Senate then will blame the House for not wanting to do anything on immigration. Now, I just, for a chance to remind you, last May, the Republican House come together in one of their times of actually coming together and actually sent HBR 2 to the Senate for consideration. This was their version of the border bill. The issue, though, is that the Senate chose not to take up pretty much any of that plan in HR 2. This makes the whole concept of Congress coming together, looking at bills, working on what they can get through each house, and then getting it signed, really to be a moot point, because they never tried. We talked about this here on the podcast. They never tried to take. Now, there are parts of what people will point out. Well, there's parts of the Senate bill that does have HR 2 in it. Not in where it comes to the main issues of how we deal with parole, how we close the border, how we deal with asylum, things like that. It's just not there. So as we look forward in this, the Senate Democrats and Joe Biden, as he came out in favor of this before it was even published, is this idea that if they can get it out of the Senate, then they'll have a way to make this a wedge issue with voters in November by saying, look, we passed this bipartisan piece of legislation that the House Republicans, who cry and talk about immigration all the time, wouldn't even take up. And I think that's the political aspect of just where we live right now. That's the political aspect and the nature of what's going on in our country, to understand that in dealing with the immigration situation, it's a problem for Democrats. And it's more of a political problem and a real problem for the country in ways that Joe Biden and his campaign team are going to have to deal with, because this will be a time in an election between Joe Biden and Donald Trump that Donald Trump can go back and show that in his last 2 years in office, the cutoff to almost a trickle of people coming across illegally was cut down when you implemented things like return, stay in Mexico when you return, and basically said, look, folks, the border is closed. Don't keep coming up here. And, deporting people and getting people not thinking that they can just come into the country and do whatever they want to do. This is going to be a clear case of an administration who actually did things to secure the border, and an administration who opened up the border basically from the moment that they stepped into the White House. So these are all issues to look at, to think about going forward. There's not a lot that you're going to see happen with this bill. The real drama will be even if it can come to a vote in the Senate. Even if it comes to a vote in the Senate, and they were somehow able to pass it, which is even further remotely chances it goes down in the next 4 or 5 days. And then the Senate is gone, by the way, after 2 weeks, so they won't even be back till the end of the month. This will be more of an internal Senate policy and a political play as we go forward in this election cycle. This is purely a political play in which the Democrats are saying, you may have made gains in the House with HR 2, but now we've passed our own bill, and you didn't choose to support it, and then just try and turn all the blame on the House Republicans for not wanting to accept what is really, frankly, a bad bill. That's your Monday update here on the Doug Collins Podcast. Glad you're with us. Stick with us all week. Of course, got Friday's Finest coming up later in the week. Other things coming up. Go to the DougCollinsPodcast.com. Share this with a friend. Share it with others. Hit the like button, subscribe button so that you will have it with you every week as we come forward from the Doug Collins Podcast. We'll see you again soon.